Hi, so you voted Liberal Democrat, is that correct?
Yes.
Can I ask you why?
I like their mental health policies. I like their stance for it. The EU wasn't a major factor in why I voted for them. Like,
How do you feel about Brexit?
I don't like it.
That's
I'm
why?
not a big fan. There's a lot of division about it, and I don't like that part of it. I personally voted to stay in, and I don't think any deal at the moment is a good deal at the moment. So, but obviously I have a different view to what your view is, which is.
Well, I just think that I've been around a long time.
Yes.
I joined the Anti-Common Market League in 1967, if you can imagine a time so remote, when dinosaurs ruled the earth. The reason why I was against Britain going into the common market, as we then called it, was because I thought it would whittle away our democracy, because we can't elect the European government. The European Parliament is the only parliament in the world that hasn't got the power to introduce legislation, and all power effectively vests in the European Commission, who are appointed technocrats who have to take an oath of office to say that they will not pay attention to the interests of the countries from which they've come to. They want to create a pan-European body which is not based on nations. So, if we don't like what is happening in the European Union, we can't do anything about it. We can't elect them, so we can't dismiss them.
So what's...
I just think that, if you imagine that we had in this country the cabinet deciding what our laws were, and we can't elect them and we can't dismiss them, would you be happy with that sort of system? Well, no, I presume.
No, but don't we have European elections? Like, what are they for?
Yeah, but the European Parliament doesn't have the power to introduce its own laws. That power is vested in the commissioners in Brussels, and they're not elected, and there's no way they can be made accountable. We can't vote for or against them as a body every 5 years because they're all appointed by an opaque process. I mean, I was a member of the European Council of Ministers, amazingly, for 2.5 years, a bit like making King Herod the Minister for Children in the government. Because I was against the whole project, but I spent 2.5 years seeing it from the inside, and it's all about horse trading behind closed doors. It's a body with a shifting membership, because the membership changes when the government changes in one of the countries that are part of the EU. And so we have no idea who these people are, let alone do we elect them or have the power to dismiss them. And once something is on the statute book in the European Union, it's the devil's own job to change it. How do you change it? How do you influence the European Commission? How do you influence the European Parliament even?
Can I just interject something, though? Like, don't all the European countries have to agree on the law before it becomes law, though? And because of the wide varying political ideals across the EU, I'm sure there would be one that would reject that.
Yeah, but there's no way in which you, as an individual elector here in Britain, can influence the process. When laws are made at Westminster, at least we know who's responsible. We know who the government are, whether it's Labour, Conservative, Coalition or whatever. And at the end of their 5-year term, or even sooner, we can pass a verdict on their period in office. And if we don't like what they've done, we can turf them out. That happened in 2010, where we got rid of Gordon Brown and got David Cameron, for God's sake. But nevertheless, it was the people's choice. How do we do that with Mr. Juncker and his pals in Brussels? We can't.
But the government that we elect anyway, they have their own foreign policy, so they would be able to influence.
Yeah, but they're one country out of 27.
But like I said, if all the EU countries have to agree, so if we don't agree, then we can always reject that law.
A lot of things aren't necessarily unanimous. I mean, it's a parliamentary process that gets... It's effectively like a step down from the Commission.
Yeah, but the UK Parliament, whether you like them or whether you voted for that UK Parliament or not, like, that's their foreign policy. Like I said, all of the EU countries have to agree anyway. It's not what you were saying
But we now live in a system where a majority of countries in the EU can make the decisions. When it all started out 50-odd years ago, every country had a veto on all sorts of things. Over the years, there's been a series of treaties which have reduced those vetoes to a small number, and now most decisions are made by majority vote. The EU wants to have harmonised taxes, for example, throughout the whole of Europe. And if we had a harmonised tax system, how would we in Britain be able to influence it? We've got 8% of the votes in the Council of Ministers. We've got one commissioner out of 28 in Brussels, and the European Parliament, because it's elected on a national basis, doesn't have a cohesive party system. We don't have pan-European parties, therefore we don't have...
I thought you guys do, though. I thought you, in the European Parliament, I thought you're part of the anti-EU,
well, there are
sentiment.
There are blocks.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
There are voting blocks.
So, hey, are you feeling any different about the EU at this point, and the sort of problem of accountability there?
No, I still like the EU. I agree. There's stuff that we all don't like about it. If I would still need to do my research to confirm what you're saying with the accountability facts, because I don't know the whole process of the. I don't know the. I'm forgetting the word. The structure of the EU.
I think he is broadly correct in what he's saying, though. I looked it up myself as well. All executive power is invested in the Commission, and we don't get to vote for them. So.
Well, I don't know you, so that's.
Of course, we do now.
So
now we're friends for life.
So, I mean, what's the positive case for the European Union? Why, if you were trying to persuade someone that the European Union was a good thing, how would you approach it?
Well, I would approach it that it's good for security because police forces can communicate with other countries on a furthermore seamless level. I would say it's good.
Can I pick you up on that? So, would you not think that there might be a problem with security if the transit across borders between nations is remarkably fluid?
No, because we had that whole Cali jungle thing, didn't we? Where there was people stopped at the border. So I would say we still have a border.
Well, that's only because we're not in the Schengen area.
So, like, it would.
What I mean is, like, and this has been a consistent problem with, and not just terrorists either, but criminals as well, going across national borders.
Yeah,
and
I've been to an airport called Basel Europort, and there is a clear distinction between Switzerland, which I believe is in the Schengen area, and France. Like, you still got to go through border checks there. There's still a definite line there. So I would say, sure, you do get people crossing borders. You get that in like the States and stuff.
You don't have that in, say, France and Germany, you know. So I mean, that might be Switzerland and Britain might be exceptions to what is otherwise a consistent problem.
All the way from the Aegean Sea to the English Channel without being stopped at a border. And that's been a problem, of course, with the refugee crisis. Once people have got inside the European Union, they can go anywhere. And so millions of so-called refugees, most of them bogus, have had the free run of it. That's caused a massive upsurge of antagonism amongst the peoples of Europe against the European Union. We see it in Hungary, and even in France, of course, Italy, and the countries that are on the front line of the refugee crisis, because they're fundamentally economic migrants, not actually fleeing from persecution. That has become a massive problem for the rest of Europe.
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree in the fact that there's the amount of people you're probably suggesting is coming through.
Can I give you a figure? This was reported by, I think it was the BBC the other day. Only 32% of the migrants that arrived in Germany are actually eligible for asylum.
Can I search that up?
Please do. I guess we'll have to wait.
What I do.
Oh, also though.
No, please.
You said migrants. Migrants is different from refugees.
Yeah, I know. 32% of the migrants are refugees.
Okay. I don't know what you're trying to suggest there.
Well, why did the other people come in?
They want jobs. Yeah.
So
I'm kind of confused where you're drawing the line.
Well, they came during the refugee crisis, and they came from all over the place, like Morocco, Algeria, places that are safe and secure and reasonably prosperous in their own way. And yet they came anyway because they expected to get money. And so Germany is now finding itself where 2/3 of the people who have come actually aren't refugees and so aren't actually eligible for asylum, and now they have to deport people.
Okay. I would say it would be on a case-by-case basis, but I think people do still come into countries, even if there's a refugee crisis, they probably label themselves as migrants. They probably come through as migrants. I don't think...
They called themselves refugees in order to be able to get in, and not millions, but probably tens of thousands of people have kind of disappeared off the radar because of the openness of the Schengen zone. I mean, I appreciate that in principle it sounds like a nice idea, but in practice there have been some real problems.
Of course, a lot of people destroy their identification documents when they arrive at the European border and claim refugee status, and then they say, oh, well, because we live in a war-torn country, all records have been destroyed, I'm afraid I can't prove my identity. But because I've arrived here, I'm now claiming asylum because I'll be persecuted where I've come from.
And they can't prove that they're not.
I don't know the refugee process in terms of how people come from the border to there, what kind of paperwork is needed. I don't want to make assumptions that people are just coming over here and claiming refugee status. I would rather do my research on that. I'm doing it now. I'm freezing.
Here's another statistic as well. This I know is correct, and that is of the appeals against a refusal of the right of entry in Britain, 50% of them fail. For people who are claiming to be refugees, they've been refused entry on grounds that they're not refugees. 50% of their appeals succeed, but 50% of them fail. So it's a system which is massively porous. And you can understand why people want to come to a rich country from a poor country. I'm not blaming them for doing this, but there's got to be some form of control because the numbers are so huge. We're adding a city the size of Cardiff to our population every single year through migration into the United Kingdom. This is not to disparage the individuals who want to come here or to say that they're useless or they're sponges or whatever. They want to better their lives. Who could blame them for wanting to? But we cannot physically take numbers on the scale that we are now enduring because it has massive implications for our infrastructure, for housing. We have to build housing for a migrant every 6 minutes, for example, and it has massive implications for the transport system, for public health.
But I think you're taking that out on the wrong government. I don't think that's a European problem. I think that's a governmental problem. Because
half and half. Actually, because half our migrants come from outside the EU, half come from within. Well, it's the European part of it has actually dipped recently, I think, because of Brexit, and also because the value of the pound has dropped. Actually, so the value of their remittances back home to Poland or Hungary or whatever have gone down. So these things do oscillate, but in the late 1990s. We added 50,000 to our population every year through migration. Last year it was 300,000. It has been at that level for the last 15 years. We've added 6 million people to our population in 20 years.
I won't I won't refute those figures, but I would say that's a good thing. I actually like immigrants. I like immigration. I think it.
You like immigrants?
Yeah, I like.
Are they all the same?
No, but I misspoke. I like the concept of immigration. I think it's a good idea for immigrants to come here, as we do to Europe, as other countries as well.
Well, can I ask you a question? Do you think that all immigration control should be scrapped?
I don't think all immigration can be scrapped. No. Sorry.
So
No.
So where do we draw the line? Numbers.
Numbers. I don't think there should be a number.
Okay, so I find that quite concerning because I don't think that a welfare state can be operated indefinitely with mass immigration because the people who have arrived haven't paid into the system, and so it turns into a kind of Ponzi scheme, doesn't it?
I don't know in terms of the Ponzi scheme thing. I would say it's still good to have immigration. I would say, okay, you disagree from that head?
No. It's. I mean, immigration in principle is not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that the way it's being carried out is very poor. I mean, one of the prime arguments for immigration is educated immigrants, doctors and nurses and things like that from India. I see that as being kind of a reverse colonialism, as in why on earth? I mean, it's very easy for a rich country to open its borders and headhunt the best and brightest from the third world, but I mean, surely that's going to keep them in the destitution in which they are now, because the best and brightest of their countries are surely needed in their countries to make their countries better. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree in the fact that all countries need their best and brightest, but If they want to go to a different country, by all means let them. If that means helping the people in the country they're going to, that's great. I don't see a problem with that.
Well, because these people were trained and reared by Indian resources. So like, if we talk Indian doctors, because there are a lot of Indian doctors in the UK is a much richer country than India, and yet we're using Indian resources to train doctors who then come over and treat British people. That strikes me as a kind of reverse colonialism.
No, I wouldn't say no, because I think Indian people, as well as any other country of people coming in, adds to the culture. It adds to.
Yeah, but that's a very selfish argument, isn't it? You're of course it is. You're arguing for the enhancement of British culture at the expense of Indian culture.
No, I'm saying Indian culture enhances British culture as British people would enhance the Indian culture.
Yeah, but these people were born and raised and trained in India at the cost and expense of the Indians, and then we say, come over here and we'll give you lots of money, and then they come over here and India loses those doctors.
I would disagree with that, because there's an NHS crisis in terms of there's always questions of funding for the NHS. I wouldn't say that's the case in terms of they're getting tons and tons of money. If they want to come here, they can come here. I don't see the problem with that, because
Look at it from India's perspective.
Yeah,
their education system has produced these professional people, and then the beneficiaries are people in Britain. Okay. So the point that Carl's making is that that's a kind of reverse colonialism, because we are actually taking their brightest and best, whereas they have paid to give them the qualifications which we're going to benefit from.
And it seems like it's entirely selfish on our
It's
part.
an issue for the Indian government, then, not for us.
Well, do you think they should close their borders?
No.
So it's kind of our responsibility, isn't it?
No, in the sense that if they still want to come, they can still come, like as we would go to them. I'm sure there's British doctors in India that's like it there.
I thought we had a shortage of doctors.
Yeah.
Well, then we're probably not exporting doctors, are we?
Possibly.
I don't think we are.
You can think that. Unless I have facts, I'm not going to...
Well, that's true, but I mean, your position is...
Problem of recruitment of GPs in Wales. I don't know about the rest of the country, but certainly in Wales we do. I represent Mid and West Wales in the Welsh Assembly, and there are parts of North Wales, like Blaenau Ffestiniog, for example, where there are almost no full-time doctors. There are locums that have come in to work for a couple of days a week or whatever. So go to see the doctor 1 week, then you'll have a different doctor if you've got to come back in a few weeks' time. This is, I think, a big problem for the health service generally. But I mean, the key point here is the question of whether it's right for us, in effect, to have medical training done at the expense of people in poorer countries than ours. And then we take advantage of their sacrifices to produce professional people from whose expertise we are going to benefit. So the Indian government isn't going to put some ban or prohibition on people going abroad from India, nor should they. But don't we have at least some responsibility for saying that we won't poach the brightest and best to the limit?
I would disagree. Like, if we want to seem as an open, tolerant society, then by all... I think poaching is the wrong word in that respect.
Well, I think it is accurate, though.
No, I don't think so. I think it's... If we have a better education system or better whatever system, depending on what area of business you're looking at, if they want to come, they can come. And then that's India's problem in terms of like thinking, right, what are we doing?
But they can't really compete with the quality of life that we can provide. And so saying, well, that's their problem, again, that doesn't seem very compassionate, frankly.
I would disagree. I think you're twisting my words here.
Sorry, how am I twisting?
Because you're saying that, we're a better country than India.
Demonstrably.
I would disagree.
By the numbers. By any metric you choose, by I don't agree that makes a country better to be having high population. But if you, but that is a number, but that's not a number that would factor into this decision. The number of people in a country isn't something that makes the country great, is it? Otherwise, China is the greatest country in the world, and they're one of the most totalitarian countries on the face of the earth. It's the quality of life that the people have there. Sort of the length of time that they live for, the average wealth of the people in the country, the access to healthcare, things like that. Britain is demonstrably better than India in all of these respects, and India can't get any better because we keep taking their best and brightest. This is why I'm saying it doesn't seem very compassionate towards India for you to say, because we're sort of like a rich honeypot for them to come to.
I'm not saying that. You're saying that.
But that is what you're saying.
No.
How are you not saying that? You think they should be able to come here, and they will come here because they get more money here, and that's better for us, but that's not very good for India.
I don't know how much Indian doctors are paid. You seem to be very.
Well, they'd be paid the same as
Well,
British doctors, but
well, in this,
paid in India. Oh, I see.
Yes.
What you mean in
Yeah.
India.
do you think they'll make the same money in India as they would here?
I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Okay, but I'm certain they won't. I mean, I'm sure we can look this up afterwards, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be, is it?
We can look it up afterwards.
All right, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was
Thank you.
lovely meeting
It was
both
great,
of you.
Cheers.
great of you to engage with us
Oh,
in
no
that
worries, thank you.
meaningful way. It's very good.
Thank you. Have a fantastic day. Thank you,
Okay,
guys.
righto, bye.
Thank you. Bye.